Hello and welcome. It's good to have you here tonight. Welcome to the Spice Sleeper. Let's not rush into anything. For now there is nothing to do but arrive, and you've already done that, just by being here. So let the day you've had begin to loosen its grip, a little at a time, the way a hand slowly opens when it finally stops holding on. You don't have to make yourself sleepy. You only have to stop keeping yourself awake. And that is so much easier. Let's just let the quiet come. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a story. It's the story of one person, a single life, from its very beginning to the strange and towering place it finally reaches. His name is Paul Atreides, and though his story unfolds across a whole universe of deserts and empires and vast sleeping worms beneath the sand, at its heart it is really the story of one boy, and what the world made of him, and what he made of himself. A boy who was born into privilege and prophecy, who lost everything in a single night, who walked out into an endless desert with nothing, and who came back as something the entire universe would kneel to and fear. Tonight we're going to follow him, gently, all the way through. But I want you to know, before we even begin, that you don't have to keep track of any of it. This is not a lesson. There's no quiz waiting at the end, no test in the morning, nothing you'll be asked to recall. If you follow Paul's whole journey, that's lovely. And if you drift away somewhere in the middle of the desert and never learn how it ends, that's lovelier still, because it means you found the thing you actually came here for, which was rest. The story is only a road for your mind to walk down until it grows tired, and your mind is allowed to lie down and sleep anywhere along the way. So wherever you are as you listen, whatever kind of day is finally releasing you now, I want you to know you've come to a safe and quiet place. Maybe the day was heavy, full of noise and small demands that never quite let up. Or maybe you simply prefer to fall asleep to a story, to a low, steady voice carrying you somewhere far away, rather than lie in the dark alone with your own thoughts. Either way, you're welcome here, and I made this one for you. So let's get you comfortable. Settle into whatever is holding you tonight, the pillow, the blanket, the warmth. Let your head grow heavy and give its weight away completely. Let your shoulders come down. They've been lifted and braced for hours without your ever asking them to, and they're allowed to rest now. Soften your jaw. Let your hands lie open and easy. There is nothing your body needs to do now but be held by the bed. And you don't need to listen carefully to me. My voice is just going to go on, low and slow and even, and you can follow the words or let them blur into a warm murmur in the dark. Both are perfectly fine. Both carry you the same direction. Both lead down toward sleep. Now, let's begin at the beginning, with a boy who did not yet know any of what was coming. Before the desert, before the throne, before the whole universe learned his name, Paul Atreides was simply a young man growing up on a green and rainy world, dreaming strange dreams he did not understand. Let me take you there. Let me show you where it all began. And so we begin where Paul himself began, on a world of water, long before the desert ever found him. The world was called Caladan. Say the name softly to yourself, and let it settle, the way a name settles when you have heard it all your life. Caladan, a green ocean world, wrapped in cloud and rain, where the sea went on forever in every direction, and the sky was almost always some shade of gray and silver and soft. This was the home of House Atreides, the seat of Paul's family for many generations, and it was the only home the boy had ever known. When you picture him now, picture him not yet as anyone important, not yet as a name that empires would fear, but simply as a boy on a rainy world, listening to the water fall. For Caladan was a world of water, rain against the high windows of the castle, rain on the stone terraces, the long gray rollers of the ocean coming in and in and in against the cliffs below, and the mist that rose from them, and the salt in the wind. Paul grew up inside that sound. He fell asleep to it, night after night, the hush of the sea folding over the castle like a blanket. And perhaps that is a fitting thing to remember as you lie here now, that the boy whose whole story you are about to follow was once just a child being carried down into sleep by the sound of falling rain. You do not have to hold on to anything tonight. You can let the water carry you, too. His family's home was an old stone castle above the sea, full of long corridors and cool halls and the weight of centuries. Paul knew every worn step of it, every place where the wind found its way through, every window where he could stand and watch the storms roll in off the water. He knew the smell of wet stone and the smell of the sea. He knew the fishermen's boats coming home in the evening, small lights moving on the dark water. It was a beautiful place, and it was a gentle place, and it was the place that made him. Whatever he would become out in the burning sand of other worlds, some part of Paul would always be the boy from the green water world, the boy who knew what rain sounded like. But even in that gentle place, the boy carried a weight. For Paul was not only a child, he was the son of a duke and the only heir to a great and ancient house. His father was Duke Leto Atreides, and to understand Paul, you must first understand what it meant to be that man's son. Duke Leto was a good man. This is a rarer thing than it sounds. In the world Paul was born into, and Paul understood it even as a child, the way children understand the important things without quite having the words. His father was honorable. His father kept his promises. His father was loved, not feared, and there is a great difference between the two. The people of Caladan loved Leto, and his soldiers loved him, and they followed him not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Paul saw this. He saw the way men's faces changed when his father walked into a room. He saw the respect that came to Leto freely, and he understood, somewhere deep down, that this was the thing his father valued most in all the universe, more than wealth, more than power. The loyalty of good people given freely. Leto called it desert power once, though Paul would not understand what that meant until much later. For now it was simply the shape of his father, honorable and beloved and steady as the old stone of the castle itself. And Paul loved him. There was tenderness between the father and the son, real tenderness, the kind that does not always find easy words, but lives in the small things. A hand on the shoulder. A quiet word of pride. The way Leto looked at his boy sometimes, with a love so deep, it carried an edge of sorrow, as though he already knew that the world would ask too much of this child too soon. Leto wanted, more than anything, for Paul to have time. Time to be young. Time to grow into himself before the burdens came. But time is the one thing a duke cannot always give his son. Because to be the son of a duke is to be, from your first breath, an heir. And to be an heir is to be watched. Paul felt this all his life, this quiet weight of expectation, the sense that eyes were always on him, measuring him, wondering what he would become. He was being raised not only to be a man, but to be a leader of men. to one day carry a house on his shoulders and answer for the lives of thousands. That is a heavy thing to lay upon a boy. And Paul carried it the way children carry such things, half understanding, feeling the shape of it without seeing all of it, sensing that he was different, that he was made for something, that more was expected of him than of other children, though no one had ever quite told him what. You do not have to carry anything like that tonight. Let that be a comfort. The weight was his, not yours. You can simply follow along and rest. Now, his mother. His mother was the Lady Jessica, and she was, in her own quiet way, the deepest mystery of Paul's childhood. She was beautiful and she was graceful, and she moved through the world with a stillness that other people did not have. But there was more to her than that, and Paul, being a watchful child, sensed it long before he understood it. For Lady Jessica was Bene Gesserit. That name will come again and again in Paul's story, so let it drift past you gently for now. Nothing to hold, nothing to memorize. The Bene Gesserit were an ancient order of women, a sisterhood, trained across thousands of years in the deepest arts of mind and body. They could do things that seemed like magic and were not. They could read the smallest movements of a face and know what a person was hiding. They could control their own bodies down to the beat of a single cell. And they worked, always, in secret, weaving their plans across generations, guiding the bloodlines of the great houses toward some distant purpose of their own. Jessica was one of these women, and she had been given an order by her sisterhood, a clear instruction meant to serve their long design. She was to bear the Duke a daughter, only a daughter. That daughter was to be a thread in a plan generations in the making, a plan to bring about a certain child, a certain bloodline at a certain time. That was her duty. That was what the sisterhood commanded. But Jessica loved Leto. She loved him not as duty, but as a woman loves a man, freely and completely. And she knew that Leto longed for a son, an heir, a boy to carry his name. And so she made a choice. She disobeyed. She used the deep control of her body that the sisterhood itself had taught her, and she bore a son instead of a daughter. She bore Paul. Sit with that gently for a moment. It means that Paul exists at all because of his mother's love and because of her disobedience. He was not supposed to be. In the great design of powerful and patient women, there was no place written for a boy named Paul. He came into the world against the plan, born of a mother who chose love over her orders. And that single act of quiet rebellion would send ripples across the entire universe, in ways that no one, not even the sisterhood, could yet see. The boy on the waterworld was already, from his very first breath, a thing that was not meant to happen, a surprise in the design, a wildness that no one had accounted for. And perhaps Paul felt that too, in the dim way of children, that he was watched not only as an heir but as something else, that his mother's eyes on him carried a question he could not name, that he was different, set apart, expected, and yet also somehow uncertain, somehow unplanned. He grew up in the space between being wanted more than anything and being not quite supposed to be. It is a strange place for a child to stand. And he stood there quietly and watched and grew. But a boy does not grow alone, and Paul did not. Around him, all through his childhood, stood the men who shaped him, and these men were like uncles to him, like older brothers, like the pillars that hold up a roof. Let me tell you of them softly, one by one, and let their names be like faces passing in a warm and firelit room. There was Duncan, Idaho. Duncan was the warm one. He was a sword master of the house, one of the finest fighters in the whole of the Imperium. But to Paul, he was something better than that. He was a friend. Duncan had an easy laugh and a bright, open heart, and he treated the boy not as an heir to be handled, but as a young man to be delighted in. When Duncan came back from a long journey, he would sweep Paul up or clasp his arm, and there was such genuine gladness in it. He was like an older brother, the kind who teaches you things and laughs with you and makes you feel, for a while, that the world is a simpler and brighter place than it truly is. From Duncan, Paul learned loyalty and courage and the plain joy of being alive. And Paul loved him without complication, the way you love the people who make you feel free. There was Gurney Halleck. Gurney was harder. He was a warrior with a scarred face and a rough voice, a man who had known suffering and had come out of it flint-hard and watchful. Gurney trained Paul in the arts of war, in the blade and the body shield, and he did not go easy on the boy. He pushed him. He pressed him. He wanted Paul ready because Gurney knew, as old soldiers know, that the world would one day try to kill this child, and love meant making him hard enough to survive it. Mood is a thing for cattle and lovemaking, Gurney would tell him. You fight when the need arises, no matter the mood. That was Gurney's hard gift. But Gurney had another side, a softer and stranger one, for he carried a small 9-string instrument called a baliset, and in the quiet hours he would play it and sing. His songs were often sad, songs of longing and of lost places, and of things that would not come again. And so from Gurney, Paul learned 2 things at once. He learned to be hard, and he learned that even the hardest men carry sad songs inside them. Both of those lessons would matter, later, more than the boy could know. There was Thufir Hawat. Thufir was old, the oldest of them, and he was a mentat. Now, in Paul's world, there were no thinking machines, no computers as we might imagine them. Long ago, humanity had risen up and destroyed all such machines and had sworn never to make them again. And so instead, they had trained certain human minds to do the work of machines, to hold vast amounts of information, and to reason with cold and flawless logic. These were the mentats, and Thufir Hawat was among the greatest of them. He had served Paul's family for 3 generations. He was the master of assassins, the keeper of the house's secrets and its safety, and he had a mind like a blade. From Thufir, Paul learned to think, to watch, to calculate, to see the pieces on the board and understand how they might move. Thufir taught him that the mind, trained and disciplined, was the deadliest weapon of all, and that a leader who could not think clearly would soon be a leader no longer. The old mentat's teaching went deep into Paul, deeper than swordplay, and it shaped the way the boy would come to see the whole turning world. And there was Dr. Yua. Wellington Yua was the household physician, a gentle man with a diamond tattoo upon his forehead, the mark of the highest and most sacred conditioning, the mark that meant he could never ever betray those in his care. Yua was quiet and kind. He tended to Paul's small hurts and sicknesses, and he spoke softly, and he lent the boy books, and there was a sorrow in him that Paul was too young to understand. Of all the men around Paul, Yua seemed the safest, the least dangerous, the most gentle. Remember that, softly, as we go on. Remember the gentle doctor with the sad eyes. But do not hold it tightly. Let it drift. These were the men who shaped him. A warm brother, a hard teacher, an old thinker, a gentle healer. Between them, they made Paul into someone remarkable, though none of them, perhaps, understood just how remarkable he would become. But there was another teacher, closer than all of these, and her teaching was the most secret of all, his mother. For Jessica did not only love Paul, she trained him, quietly, privately, away from the eyes of the household. She began to pass on to him the deep arts of the Bene Gesserit, the arts that were meant only for the sisterhood, that were forbidden to men. This too was a kind of disobedience, another one. A mother giving her son the secret weapons of an order that would not have wanted him to have them. She taught him the discipline of the mind. She taught him the control of the body, how to slow the breath, how to steady the heart, how to master fear and pain. She taught him to observe, to notice everything, to read the truth beneath a person's words. And she began to teach him the voice. The voice was one of the sisterhood's most secret powers, a way of speaking, a certain pitch and command laid into the words themselves, so that a person hearing it would obey without even knowing why. It took long training to learn, and longer to master, and Paul was only at the beginning of it. But even at the beginning, there was power there, and the boy felt it, and it thrilled him and frightened him a little too. And she taught him the litany against fear. This was a small thing his mother gave him, a set of words to say in the dark when fear came, and I will give it to you now, softly, because it is one of the gentlest things in all of Paul's story. When Paul was afraid, he would say, quietly, inside himself, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me, and when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Say it to yourself now, if you like, slowly, and let it loosen something in you. I must not fear. There is nothing to fear here. Only the quiet and the dark and the soft sound of the words. You can let the fear, if there is any, pass over you and through you, and when it is gone, there is only you, resting, safe, letting go. That was his mother's gift, a way to be unafraid in the dark, and you may borrow it tonight. So this was Paul's childhood, a green water world, a beloved father and the weight of being his heir, a mother whose love had made him and whose secret teaching was shaping him. The men who trained his body and his mind. The rain and the sea and the old stone castle above the cliffs. It was in so many ways a good beginning. A boy could not have asked for more. And yet, there were the dreams. Night after night, as Paul slept to the sound of Kaladin's rain, he did not dream of the sea. He dreamed of sand. He dreamed of a place he had never been, a vast and burning desert under an enormous sky, dunes rolling away to the horizon like a golden ocean, so different from the gray water world he knew, and yet somehow impossibly familiar. He dreamed of a desert he had never seen. And in the desert, again and again, there was a girl. A young woman with dark hair and eyes of the deepest blue, blue upon blue, eyes with no white in them at all, and she looked at him across the sand as though she knew him, as though she had always known him, as though she were waiting. The dreams were not like ordinary dreams. Ordinary dreams fade when you wake, and you forget them. But these stayed. These felt like memory, though they were memories of things that had not yet happened. Paul would wake in the gray Kaladin morning with the sand still burning behind his eyes and the girl's face still clear in his mind, and he would carry them with him through the day, uneasy and fascinated all at once. He did not understand them. He did not know how a person could remember the future, could ache for a place he had never been and a face he had never met. But he could not stop dreaming them, and he could not stop wondering what they meant. He was too young then to know that some part of him was already reaching forward into what was coming, that the boy who slept to the rain was already, in his dreams, walking out into the desert of his own fate. He only knew that he dreamed, and that the dreams felt true, and that they would not leave him alone. And then, one day, into the quiet rhythm of that water world, into the rain and the training and the dreams, came word. Word from the highest power in the universe, from the Emperor himself, the Padishah Emperor who ruled over all the great houses and all the known worlds. The Emperor had made a decree. He was taking a certain planet away from one great house and giving it to another. He was giving it to House Atreides. He was giving it to Paul's father. And the planet was a desert planet. A world of endless burning sand under an enormous sky. A world called Arrakis. The desert of Paul's dreams was real. And now, his family was being sent to it. Somewhere, deep in the boy, something turned over. Some quiet recognition. Some cold and secret certainty that the dreaming was over and the thing itself was about to begin. Rest here a moment, in the last quiet of the water world, before we follow Paul away from the rain and out toward the sand and toward the strange and terrible test that waited for him there. You passed the test few have ever passed, though you did not know, that morning, that a test was coming at all. She came to Caladan before you left it, the old woman, the one your mother served and feared in equal measure. A reverend mother of the Bene Gesserit, Gaius Helen Mohiam, older than seemed possible, wrapped in black, her eyes carrying the weight of a long and secret purpose. She had come a great distance to look at you, to look inside you, and though you were only a boy on the edge of leaving home forever, you understood, in the way children understand the weather of a room, that something important was about to be asked of you, and that you would have no choice but to answer. Your mother brought you to the chamber and then, strangely, painfully, she was made to stand aside. She could not help you now. You saw it in the stillness of her body, the way she held herself against the wall, her hands folded, her face composed the way she had taught you to compose your own. Whatever was about to happen, you would have to face it alone, and she would have to watch, and neither of you could change that. The old woman told you to come close. She told you to put your hand inside a box. It was a small thing, that box, dark and plain, resting there as if it were nothing. But you felt the wrongness of it, the way an animal feels a trap. You did not want to put your hand inside. Every part of you drew back from it. And then you felt, cold at the side of your neck, the point of a needle. The Gom Jabbar, she called it, meaning the high-handed enemy, meaning death. A poison so quick that a scratch would end you before you could finish a breath. Keep your hand in the box, she said. Pull it out, and you die. So you held still. You put your hand into the dark, and you kept it there, and you waited. And then the pain began. It started small, a warmth, a prickling, and then it grew, and grew, and became fire. It felt as though your hand were burning, as though the skin were blistering and peeling, as though the flesh were cooking on the bone. It felt utterly real. Your whole body screamed at you to pull away, to tear your hand out of that box and save it, save yourself, obey the oldest and simplest law of every living thing, which is to flee from pain. The animal in you wanted to run. The animal in you did not care about needles or old women or tests. It only knew that it was burning and that it must stop. But you had been taught something, and in that moment you reached for it. Words your mother had given you, a small, quiet weapon against the roaring of fear. And so, inside, where no one could hear, you began to say it to yourself. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. You said it slowly, the way you might breathe on a cold night, each word a step away from the edge. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. And you held on. You let the fear move through you like a wave passing through water, and you did not let it move your hand. The pain did not lessen. If anything, it grew worse, terrible, unbelievable, the whole of your attention narrowing to that one burning point. But somewhere beneath the pain, a stillness had opened, a place the fire could not reach, and from that stillness you watched your own agony as if from a little distance, and you did not run. You breathed. You waited. You endured what could not be endured, because something in you had decided that you would. And then, when it seemed it would never stop, it stopped. The old woman told you to take your hand from the box, and you drew it out, and you looked at it, expecting ruin, expecting char and blood, and there was nothing. Your hand was whole. Unmarked, untouched, the burning had been an illusion, poured directly into your nerves, pain without injury. The mind convinced of a fire that had never been. She had wanted to see whether you could tell the difference between the impulse of the animal and the will of the human. Whether in the grip of pure terror, with your body begging you to save it, you could hold to something higher than your own flesh. An animal caught in a trap will chew off its own leg to escape. A human will stay and endure and wait and think. She had wanted to know which of these you were, and you had shown her. You had kept your hand in the box. She looked at you differently then. There was something in her face you did not fully understand, a kind of startled reckoning, as though you had surprised her, as though you had done something she had half hoped for and half feared. She had tested many, she said, boys and men, and they had not held on as you had. She spoke to your mother in a low, tense voice, and you caught the edges of it, words that were too large for the small room. She was uneasy. She was almost afraid. And beneath her unease there was a question she seemed unwilling to say aloud, a possibility so old and so enormous that even she, who had come all this way to test you, did not quite dare to name it. Because the sisterhood she served had been working in secret for a very long time, longer than kingdoms, longer than the memory of most worlds. Through the quiet arrangement of bloodlines across countless generations, mother to daughter to mother again, they had been reaching toward something. A person who did not yet exist. A mind that could go where their minds could not, that could stand in a place no man had ever stood and no woman could reach, and see. They had a name for the one they were breeding toward, a name spoken rarely and carefully. The Kwisatz Haderach, the shortening of the way. The one who would bridge space and time, who could look into the past of every ancestor and forward into the tangled roads of the future, and hold it all in a single living mind. And you were not supposed to be him. Not yet. Not you. You had come too soon. A generation too early. A boy where there should have been no one. Born of a plan that had been bent and broken by love. And yet you had kept your hand in the box. And the old woman had seen it. And she went away carrying a warning heavier than any gift, murmuring that the human race must never grow complacent, that the world was watching what would become of you, that a boy like you was a danger and a hope wrapped together in the same small frame. She left, and you were alone with what she had left behind. Because how does a boy carry a thing like that? To be told, in words never quite spoken, that you might be someone enormous, that there might be a shape waiting for you, a destiny stitched into your blood before you drew breath, a role written by strangers across 10,000 years. You had not asked for it. You did not want it. You only wanted to be yourself, to be Paul, a boy who loved his mother and his father, who trained with the men who were like uncles to you, who walked the wet green cliffs of home and watched the sea. You did not want to be a bridge or a shortening or a savior. You did not want the weight of other people's ancient hunger placed upon your shoulders, and yet you could feel it settling there anyway, quiet and enormous, like a shadow that had always been yours and had only now grown large enough to notice. And the dreams did not help you. The dreams grew stronger. They had always come to you, those visions of a place you had never seen, a world of sand and burning light, an ocean of dunes rolling to every horizon. But now, as Arrakis drew near, as the day of leaving pressed close, they sharpened. They came more often. They came with more force. You would close your eyes and be there, feet in warm sand, wind full of grit and strange spice, the sky a hard pale blue. And through the dreams there moved things you did not understand, flashes of blood, ranks of men marching under a green banner, crying out a word, a name that might have been your own. Fire in the desert. A blade. A crowd of faces turned toward you as if you were something they worshipped, or something they feared. You did not know what any of it meant. You could not tell whether these were memories of what would be, or only shadows of what might be. Roads not yet chosen. Futures flickering like candle flames, each one guttering into another before you could hold it still. And always, through all of it, there was the girl. You did not know her name. You would not know it for a long while yet. But she was there in nearly every dream, a young woman with eyes of the deepest blue, blue upon blue, no white in them at all, and she looked at you as though she already knew you, as though she had been waiting for you across all that distance of sand and time. Sometimes she spoke, and you could not hear her. Sometimes she only looked. Sometimes she turned away, and the dream broke, and you woke with your heart pounding and her face already fading, and a strange ache in your chest, a homesickness for a person you had never met, a longing for a place that frightened you. She was the desert. Somehow, she was Arrakis. She was whatever waited for you out there beyond the green world you knew, and you could not tell whether she was calling you towards something wonderful or something terrible, and perhaps she was both. And then, the leaving came. You left Caladan. You left the only world you had ever known, the world of water and mist and cold gray seas, of rain on the windows and the smell of the ocean in every room. You would not come back. Somewhere inside you, you understood this, though no one said it plainly. You looked at the green cliffs and the moving water and the great old house of your family, and you tried to hold it all, to press it into your memory so that you would not lose it, because you knew that whatever you were traveling toward, you were also leaving something behind that you could never have again. The place where you had been only a child. The place where you had been only yourself. You crossed the great dark between the stars. You went up out of the world you loved and into the strangeness of the void, carried in the vast belly of ships too large to imagine, folded across distances the mind could not truly hold, and as you traveled, you felt the thing your father felt, though neither of you spoke of it too openly. That you were going into danger. That the gift you had been given was not a gift at all. Because the Emperor himself had commanded it. He had taken the desert world from your family's oldest enemies, the Harkonnens, who had held it and bled it for generations, and he had handed it to your father, to House Atreides, as though it were an honor. But your father was not a foolish man, and you were not a foolish boy, and you could both feel the shape of the thing beneath the ceremony. The desert world was the most precious planet in all the known universe, for it alone produced the spice, the substance that made all travel between the stars possible, the thing every power in existence hungered for. No one gives away such a prize out of kindness. To be given Arrakis was to be given a target painted upon your back. Your enemies would not simply walk away from the richest world there was, and an emperor who feared the rising love and loyalty your father commanded might find it very convenient to place House Atreides in a beautiful, deadly trap, and let it close. Your father knew this. He spoke of it in his quiet way, of walking in with open eyes, of desert power, of making something of Arrakis that no one expected, of turning the trap into a home. He was brave, your father, and he was wise, and still you could feel the fear beneath his courage, the knowledge that he was leading everyone he loved into a place designed to destroy them. Because a duke does not refuse the command of his emperor, because there was no path that did not lead through that desert, because sometimes the only way is forward into the danger, with your head held high. And you carried your own strange burden alongside his. Because you were afraid of Arrakis, and you were drawn to it, and both feelings lived in you at once and would not be separated. You dreaded the trap. You dreaded the blood you had seen in your dreams, the fire, the crowds, the enormous, unwanted shape of a destiny you did not choose. And yet some part of you leaned toward that world the way a plant leans toward light, because the desert had lived in your sleep for as long as you could remember, because the blue-eyed girl was there, because whatever you were meant to become, you could feel that it waited for you out there among the dunes, and there was no turning back from it now. And so the ships came down. They fell through the pale sky of Arrakis, enormous and slow, settling toward a world of stone and sand, and you looked out and saw it at last with your waking eyes, the place that had haunted your sleep. Endless, golden, cruel, and beautiful, and vast. The dunes rolled away farther than sight could follow, and the light was hard and white, and the heat rose shimmering from the ground before you had even touched it. This was the world that would take everything from you. This was the world that would make you into whatever you were meant to be. And when the ramp came down and the doors opened, you breathed it in for the first time. The dry, burning air of the desert, the faint bite of cinnamon on the wind, the smell of the spice that ran through everything here, that colored the very breath of the planet. It filled your lungs. It was strange and sharp and unlike anything from home, and something in you turned over quietly at the taste of it. Some old sleeping thing beginning, slowly, to wake. You stood at the threshold of the desert world, a boy still, holding your father's danger and your mother's secrets, and the old woman's warning, and the blue-eyed girl of your dreams, all together inside you. And you took that first breath of Arrakis, and everything that you had been began, gently, to end. And everything you were meant to become, began, gently, to begin. And so the ship carried you down through the pale sky of Arrakis, and the world that opened beneath you was unlike anything you had ever known. You had grown up on Caladan, a place of gray seas and constant rain, of green hills and the sound of water moving everywhere, always, like a heartbeat under the world. And now you stepped out onto a planet made entirely of thirst. The heat met you first, before you had even fully descended, a wall of it, dry and enormous, pressing against your skin and drawing the moisture from your lips within moments. The light was hard and white. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon, of something old and warm and strange, and you did not yet know that this scent was the spice itself, drifting on the wind, already touching you, already beginning its slow and patient work inside you. Arrakis rose before you out of the sand, the city that would now be your father's seat, walls of stone the color of bone, shielded and shuttered against the desert that pressed in on every side. And beyond the city, there was nothing. There was only the desert, vast and golden and endless, dunes rolling to the horizon like a frozen sea, and above it all the wide burning sky. You stood and looked at it, and something in you turned toward it the way a plant turns toward the sun. You could not have said why. You only felt it, a pull, a quiet certainty settling into your chest that this place had been waiting for you, or that you had been made, somehow, for this place. They taught you quickly the laws of survival here, for on Arrakis water was more precious than gold, more precious than anything. You learned to wear the still suit, that strange second skin the desert people had made, a suit that wrapped your whole body and reclaimed the water your body gave off, your sweat and your breath, filtering it, returning it to you, so that a person could walk for days across the open sand and lose almost nothing. You learned that here they did not weep for the dead in the old way, because to weep was to give water to the sand, and water was life, and life could not be wasted. You learned that a stranger who arrived on Arrakis arrived already dying, and that only care and knowledge could keep the desert from taking you back grain by grain. And you were fascinated. You could not help it. The Fremen, the people of the desert, the ones who had lived here since long before the great houses came for the spice, moved through this cruel world as though it were their mother rather than their enemy. You saw them at the edges of things, watchful, their eyes a deep and startling blue, blue from lid to lid, blue all the way through, colored by a lifetime of breathing the spice. They wore their still suits like they had been born in them. They watched your family with faces that gave nothing away, and yet when they looked at you, you felt they were measuring something, weighing you against some old story they carried. There was a woman among them, the one they called Chani, though you did not yet know her name, only that you had seen her face already, again and again, in the dreams that had come to you across the light years before you ever set foot on this world. And when you saw her at last with your waking eyes, standing real and living in the true desert, you understood that your dreams were not only dreams. Something was showing you the way forward. Something was showing you her. Your mother had told you that the spice was everywhere here, in the food, in the water, in the very air you breathed, and that a person could not live on Arrakis without taking it into themselves. And you felt it working. Your senses grew sharper, keener, almost painfully alive. Colors seemed to deepen. Sounds arrived to you layered with meaning, and the visions, which had always come to you in fragments, began to come more often now, and more vividly, flashes of things not yet happened, images that arrived without warning and left you shaken, uncertain whether you were remembering the future or only fearing it. You did not understand what was happening to you. You only knew that the desert was changing you, opening you, and that the change was not gentle. Then came the day you first saw the spice harvested, and you will not forget it as long as you live. Your father took you out over the deep desert in a craft that flew low above the dunes, and below you, the great harvester crawled across the sand, an enormous machine, a factory on treads, sucking the precious spice up out of the earth. Spotters circled it in the air, watching, always watching. And you asked what they were watching for, and before anyone could answer you felt it, a trembling in your bones, a wrongness in the sand. The desert itself began to move. A ripple ran beneath the surface, coming fast, coming straight for the harvester, and out of the dunes there rose a thing so vast that your mind refused at first to accept it. A sandworm. A creature longer than the harvester, longer than a city street, its mouth a great round pit ringed with countless teeth, rising up out of the sand as though the desert had opened a throat to swallow the sky. The harvester crew scrambled to escape. The carryall came to lift the machine to safety, and failed, and the worm took the harvester whole, took it down into the sand as easily as the sea takes a stone. And you stood at the window of your craft, trembling, and you felt two things at once, so strong and so entangled that you could not tell them apart. You felt terror, the ancient animal terror of a thing that could unmake you in an instant. And you felt awe, a wonder so deep it was almost love. This was the true master of Arrakis, not your father, not the emperor, not any house or army, but this. And some part of you, the part the spice was waking, whispered that you would meet this creature again, that your fate and the worm's were bound together, though you could not yet imagine how. But even as the desert opened itself to you, even as it called to you, a shadow was closing around your family, and you felt its edges without being able to name it. Your father had come to Arrakis knowing it was a trap. The Emperor had given House Atreides this rich and terrible prize, this planet and its spice, not as a gift but as a snare, because your father had grown too loved, too admired among the great houses, and a loved man is a dangerous man to those who rule by fear. The old masters of Arrakis, House Harkonnen, cruel and vast and patient, had left the planet reluctantly, and everyone knew they meant to return. Your father wore his worry quietly, but you saw it in him, in the tightness around his eyes, in the long silences, in the way he watched the desert and the doors and the faces of the men around him. The whole household felt it, that unease, that sense of something coiled and waiting just out of sight. You felt it too. But you were young, and you trusted the strength of your house, and you told yourself the danger was still far away. It was not far away. It was inside the walls. The night it came in darkness and in silence. There was a man among you, Dr. Yue, the family physician, a gentle and learned man whom you had trusted all your life, a man bound by the deepest conditioning never to do harm. And yet the Harkonnens had found the one thing that could break even that conditioning. They had taken his wife, and they held her, and they promised him they would free her if he betrayed your house. And so this broken man, hating himself, weeping inside for what he did, went to the great shield generators that protected Arrakeen, and he lowered them. He opened the door. And through that open door poured death. You woke to alarms and to the sound of fighting, to smoke and to shouting, and to the terrible confusion of a house falling. The Harkonnen forces came in overwhelming numbers, and with them, disguised in Harkonnen colors, came the Sardaukar, the Emperor's own soldiers, the most feared warriors in all the known worlds, sent in secret to make certain that House Atreides did not survive the night. Your family's soldiers fought, and they fought bravely, but they had been betrayed from within, their shields down, their enemies already among them, and there was no holding back the tide. The walls that had felt so strong to you dissolved into chaos. Everywhere there was running and falling and the flat cold work of killing, and you were pulled through it half blind, your mother's hand on you. Loyal men closing around you to keep you alive. Somewhere in that long dark night, your father fell into their hands. The Duke Leto Atreides, your father, who had loved you more than he ever knew how to say, who had told you that a great man does not seek to lead, but is called to it by his people, who had promised you that there was a place for you in whatever came next. They took him, and they carried him to the Baron, the monstrous head of House Harkonnen, and they laid him low before his enemy. Dr. Yua, in the wreckage of his own soul, had given your father one last mercy and one last weapon, a false tooth filled with poison gas, so that even captured, even beaten, your father might strike a final blow. And in the end, your father breathed out that poison in a room full of his enemies, trying to take the Baron with him, and though the Baron survived, your father did not. He died there, far from you, far from the sea and the rain of the home he had left behind. And you did not get to say goodbye. You did not get to hold his hand. You lost him in a single night, and with him you lost your house, your name, your world, everything you had ever known yourself to be. One evening you were the son of a duke, heir to a great and ancient family. By morning, you were a fugitive with nothing, hunted across a planet that wanted you dead. They did not kill you outright, you and your mother. That was not the plan they had made for you. Instead, they bound you and gagged you and flew you out into the deep desert, far from any help, to a place where the two of you would simply vanish, swallowed by the sand, so that no one could ever say the Atreides heir had been murdered. They meant for the desert to do their killing for them. A man flew the craft that carried you, and another guarded you, and they spoke of you as though you were already dead, already gone. But they did not understand what your mother was, and they did not understand what you were becoming. Your mother was of the Bene Gesserit, the ancient sisterhood, and she carried within her the voice, that trained and terrible power to command a person with the sound of a word alone, to reach past the thinking mind and seize the body's own obedience. In the desert, in the dark, with your hands bound, she found her moment, and she used the voice, and she turned your captors against each other. And you were not the frightened boy they thought you were. The spice had been at work in you, and your mind had grown cold and quick and clear, sharpened to an edge you were only beginning to feel. In the crisis, you did not freeze. You saw. You found your own voice, the same terrible gift your mother carried, and you used it, this power you had barely known you had, and in the confusion the two of you broke free. Loyal men had not forgotten you either. Duncan Idaho, your father's swordmaster, the man who had lifted you as a child, who had gone ahead to the Fremen and made bonds with them, came for you across the desert and found you, and fought to keep you alive, buying your escape with his own courage. And so you slipped away, out of the hands that meant to kill you, out into the open desert with almost nothing, a little water, a tent, a few tools, and the endless night around you. Alone, truly alone, for the first time in your life. No house, no army, no father, no walls. Only your mother beside you, and the sand and the enormous silent stars. That first night in the deep desert, you and your mother made camp in a small tent tucked into the shelter of the rocks, and it was there, in the dark, with grief still raw and screaming inside you, that the great awakening came. The spice was thick in you now, thick in the air, thick in every breath, and it seized your mind and threw it wide open, wider than it had ever gone, and time itself came apart around you. The visions crashed over you like a wave larger than the world. You saw not one future, but many, countless futures, branching and branching again, roads spreading out before you into the dark, a vast and shifting landscape of everything that might yet come to pass. You saw yourself walking among the Fremen. You saw the blue-eyed woman from your dreams standing close to you, real and near. You saw the desert people rising. You saw yourself lifted up, spoken of, followed, worshipped. And then you saw the thing that would haunt you for the rest of your days. You saw a holy war. You saw your name become a banner, become a scream, become a reason to kill. You saw legions of the faithful pouring off Arrakis and across the stars, world after world, carrying your face before them, carrying your name in their mouths, and behind them they left fire. And behind the fire they left the dead. Billions of the dead, whole planets drowned in blood spilled in your name. You saw green banners marching across the galaxy and a tide of corpses in their wake, and you understood, with a horror that turned your whole body cold, that this future was not distant, not impossible, but near. One of the strongest of all the roads spreading out before you, a thing the desert itself seemed to be pushing you toward. You cried out against it. Everything in you recoiled. You had not asked for this. You were a grieving boy who had just lost his father, who wanted only to survive the night, and here was this monstrous thing rising up before you. A war fought in your name across the whole of creation, a slaughter beyond imagining, and somehow, terribly, it wore your face. You did not want to be a prophet. You did not want to be a weapon. You did not want billions to die because of you, and yet you could feel the currents of it gathering, could feel yourself being drawn into something so vast that your own small will seemed like a leaf on a flood. And braided through all of it, through the visions and the terror and the enormous branching dark, was your grief. Your father was dead. The simple human fact of it kept returning to you between the great and terrible sights, small and sharp and unbearable. He was gone. He would never see what you became. He had believed in a place for you in the world to come, and now the world to come was opening before you, and it was full of horror, and he was not there to guide you through it. Your sorrow for him and your fear of what you were becoming ran together until you could not separate them, until the loss of your old self and the loss of your father felt like the same wound. When the vision at last released you, you lay in the dark of the tent, shaking. Changed, you were not the boy who had left Caladan. You were not even the boy who had watched the sandworm rise from the sand. Something enormous had entered you. Some knowledge, some sight, some seed of a destiny you did not want and could not refuse. The desert had cracked you open and poured itself inside. And outside the tent, the night desert lay silent and immense, the dunes silver under the stars, the cold, clean air moving softly over the sand. Somewhere out there, you knew the Fremen were watching. You had felt them near, felt the desert turning its attention toward you, felt the story they carried begin to reach for you across the dark. You and your mother were alone now, alone and grieving and utterly changed, two small figures in the vastness, with everything you had ever been left behind you, and everything you were about to become still hidden in the sand ahead. And in that stillness, in that waiting, the blue-eyed people of the desert were already moving quietly toward the place where you lay, ready to find you, ready to draw you into their world at last. And so the desert takes them in. You remember how it happens, the way it comes upon Paul in the blue dark of a Fremen night, when the sand has finally gone cool and the stars press close overhead. Let your body soften now as you follow him into it. Let your shoulders sink a little deeper, the way his do when the strangers step out of the rocks. They come quietly, these people of the deep desert, wrapped in dust-colored cloaks. Their eyes the deep and total blue of the spice, and they surround Paul and his mother the way water closes over a stone. There is no shouting. There is only that patient desert stillness, and the sense that a decision is being made about whether the two of them will live or die. Stilgar is there, the leader of these people, broad and weathered and unhurried, and he studies Paul and Jessica with the careful attention of a man who wastes nothing, not water, not words, not lives. In the desert, everything has weight. Everything must earn its place. And Paul, standing there beside his mother, with the wind pulling at his stolen desert clothes, understands that he has crossed out of the world he knew and into a world with its own hard law, older than any duke, older than any empire. Here, a person is measured not by their name, but by whether they can be trusted to carry water for the tribe and not spill it. You can feel how uncertain it all is. The Fremen do not welcome outsiders. Outsiders bring the off-world soldiers, the hunters, the ones who scour the sand for spice and think the desert people are only vermin to be cleared away. And yet, Stilgar sees something in Paul. He sees the way the boy carries himself, the strange calm under the fear, and he speaks of him almost gently, as if half remembering an old story he was told as a child. Others in the group are not so gentle. They see two soft off-worlders, a woman and a boy, mouths that will drink the Sietch's water and give nothing back, and one of them, a man named Jameis, will not let it rest. Let the quiet hold you here for a moment. Let the breath go slow and even, in and out, like the tide of sand. Jameis challenges the way of it. He believes Stilgar is wrong to take them in, and by the hard old custom of the desert, that disagreement can only be settled one way. A challenge. A duel. Not with words, but with the Kryze knife, the milk-white blade the Fremen carve from the tooth of a great sandworm, a blade that, once drawn, tradition says must not be sheathed again until it has tasted blood. And so it falls to Paul. Not to his mother, not to Stilgar, but to Paul himself, the boy who has never in his life taken another's life, to stand in a ring of watching blue eyes and fight for the right to simply exist among these people. You feel his fear, don't you? It is a clean, cold thing. He has trained his whole life. He knows how to move, how to read the tilt of a shoulder, the intention behind an eye. His mother taught him. His father's men taught him. But training is a game with soft blades and understood rules, and this is not a game. This is a man who means to end him, circling him in the low firelight, and Paul has never before had to choose to end someone in return, and there is a strange doubling in him as it begins. Because Paul has seen this. In his dreams, in the visions that have haunted him since before he ever set foot on this world, he has seen this desert, these people, this knife. And now the dream and the waking are folding together, and he cannot always tell which is which. His body moves and his mind watches, and part of him is already grieving before the thing is even done. The fight is not clean, and it is not quick. Jameis is skilled and desperate and used to killing. Paul is careful and reluctant and slow to strike because some part of him still hopes it will not have to end this way. He tries to hold back. He tries to leave a door open, but the desert law does not leave doors open, and in the end there is only the moment when the blade goes home and Jameis falls still upon the sand. And here is the thing you should hold gently, the way Paul holds it. He does not feel triumph. He feels the enormous, quiet weight of it. He has taken a life, a real man, with a name, with people who loved him, with water in his flesh that the tribe will now reclaim. Paul kneels there in the aftermath, and something moves through him that will never fully leave him again. He weeps, and the Fremen watching are astonished, because among a people who ration every drop to give water to the dead, to cry for a fallen enemy, is the deepest honor there is. He gives moisture to the dead, and in doing so, without meaning to, Paul begins to become one of them. Let that settle over you softly. The boy has changed. Something has closed behind him, and something new has opened. He is not the same as he was in the halls of his father's house. He has crossed into the country from which there is no returning, and he carries that first death with him now. Quietly, the way you carry a stone in a pocket, always aware of its shape. And then, out of the ring of watchers, comes the girl. You already know her, in a way, because Paul already knows her. He has been dreaming of her for longer than he can remember, this girl with the dark hair and the deep blue eyes, appearing to him in the visions that came before he ever crossed the black of space to reach this world. In his dreams, she spoke to him. She walked with him across the sand. She looked at him as though she knew him, and now here she is, real, standing in the flesh in the flickering light, and her name is Chani. Feel how strange and tender that is. To have loved the idea of someone before you ever met them. To have carried their face inside your own mind like a promise. And now, the promise is standing in front of him, and she is not soft, and she is not a dream. She is sharp and wary and entirely herself, a young warrior of the desert who has watched offworlders bring nothing but grief to her people. She does not trust him. Why would she? He is exactly the kind of outsider whose kind has hunted her family across the dunes since before she was born. So it does not begin as love. It begins as caution, and slowly, patiently, it becomes something more. Chani teaches him. That is how it grows between them, in the small, ordinary lessons of survival. She shows him how to live in the desert without dying of it. And Paul, who has been a duke's son, who has been taught to command, learns instead to listen. He learns to watch her hands and do as she does. And in the learning, the wariness between them wears thin, and underneath it there is a person, and underneath the person there is trust, and underneath the trust, slowly, so slowly there is love. And here is what she gives him, the thing that matters most. She sees Paul, not the heir to a fallen house, not the off-world boy the prophecies whisper about, just the man. When she looks at him, she is not looking for a savior or a symbol or a weapon. She is looking at him, at the person he actually is, at the fear and the tenderness and the grief he carries, and she loves that, and only that. In a life that will fill up more and more with people who want him to be something enormous, Chani is the one who wants him to be only himself. Hold on to that softness as you drift. Someone who sees the man and not the legend. There is nothing more precious in his whole story than that. The days become a rhythm now, and there is a peace in the rhythm, and you can let yourself sink into it the way Paul does. He learns the desert. He learns it the way a child learns a language, patiently, from the inside. He learns the broken walk, the strange irregular stride the Fremen use to cross the open sand, a step without pattern, without rhythm, so that the great worms beneath will not feel a steady heartbeat drumming through the dunes and come to investigate, step, and pause, and shuffle, and drag, a dance with no music, made to fool a monster. He learns to move like the desert itself moves, without intention, and the worms let him pass. He learns the still suit, that second skin the Fremen wear, the marvel of it, the way it captures the moisture of the body, the breath, the sweat, even the water of the eyes, and reclaims it, filters it, returns it clean to be sipped again through a tube at the throat. In the deep desert, a person becomes a closed world, losing nothing, and the discipline of that becomes a way of being. Water is life. Water is sacred. To spit is to give someone a gift. To weep is to give the greatest gift of all. And the Fremen carry their dead to be rendered down, their water given back to the tribe, because even in death, you do not waste the water. Paul learns all of this, and it reshapes him from the inside, this constant tender attention to every precious drop. He learns the sietch, the hidden warren of caverns behind the rock where the tribe lives, out of the sun, out of the wind, out of the eyes of the hunters overhead. He learns its customs, its courtesies, the way the people move around each other in the close dark, the great catch basins of water they have hoarded for generations toward a dream of a green world someday. And he begins, for the first time since his father died, to feel something he had thought was lost to him forever. He begins to feel that he belongs somewhere, that there is a place that would notice if he were gone, that there are people around him who are, in the slow way of the desert, becoming his own. And they give him names. This is how you know a person has truly come inside a people, when they are given the names that belong only to the inside. In the intimacy of the tribe, in the closeness of the sietch, they call him Usul, which means the strength of the base of the pillar, a private name, a warm name, the name a friend uses in the dark. And then there is the other name, the name he chooses for himself to carry out into the world, the public name, the name of a man among men. Muad'Dib, the desert mouse, the small creature of the deep sand that the Fremen admire, the one who lives where nothing should be able to live, who knows how to survive the sun, who is wise in the ways of the dry places. Paul takes the name of the little mouse that endures, and in taking it, he steps fully into their world. Let your breathing slow with his. There is a settledness in him now that there has not been since the very beginning. He has grief in him, and dreams that frighten him, and a legend gathering at his back like a storm on the horizon. But here, in the sietch, with Chani beside him and Stilgar's respect around him, and the names of the tribe upon him, he has something like a home. Feel how good that is. Let it be good for a little while. And then comes the worm. You should let this part come to you the way it comes to Paul, half real and half like something out of a dream. Because to be truly Fremen, truly of the deep desert, a person must do the one thing that seems impossible. They must ride the Maker. They must call one of the great sandworms up out of the dunes, one of those vast and ancient creatures, longer than a ship, old beyond counting, and they must run alongside it as it surges up through the sand, and they must climb it. With their hooks, they pull back the edge of one of its ringed segments, opening the soft flesh beneath to the abrasion of the sand, so that the worm rises higher to keep that tender place away from the grit, and in doing so it lifts them, and turns for them, and carries them where they wish to go. Imagine it. The ground itself heaving, a wall of sand rising toward the sky, the thunder of it in the chest, the roar of it filling the whole world. And Paul, small against that immensity, running, timing it, throwing his hooks, and then rising, standing at last upon the back of the greatest living thing on the planet as it races across the open desert with the wind screaming past and the dunes flowing away beneath him like a golden sea. It is terror, and it is joy, and it is something close to worship, all at once. He rides the Maker. He does the thing that makes him truly one of them, and when he comes down from it, the Fremen see him differently. Not as an outsider who fought his way in, but as one of their own, tested by the deepest test the desert can offer. He has ridden a worm. He belongs to the sand now. And you can feel the acceptance settle around him like warmth, the tribe opening fully to take him in. But you should know, as you drift here in this peaceful place, that there is a shadow woven all through this belonging, and it is growing. Because there is a prophecy among the Fremen. An old story, passed down through the generations, that one day a voice from the outer world would come to them, a mother and her son from beyond the desert, and that this one would lead them, and free them, and make the dry world green, the Lisan al-Gaib they call the one who is to come. The voice from the outer world, a Messiah. And here is the quiet, uneasy truth that Paul comes to understand. That prophecy was not born among the Fremen. It was planted there, long ago, by the same secret sisterhood his mother belongs to, the Bene Gesserit, who for centuries seeded such myths across countless worlds, so that one day one of their own, arriving as a stranger, might find a legend already waiting to protect them. The story was made to be used. And now, Paul and his mother have walked straight into the shape of it. And some of the Fremen begin to look at Paul and see not Usul, not the desert mouse, not the young man who wept for Jameis, but the one who was promised. They see the Messiah. And his mother, who has become something more now, a reverend mother, having drunk the terrible sacred poison and survived it, and taken all the memories of the mothers before her into herself, his mother moves quietly among the tribes and tends that belief, and feeds it, and shapes it, because she believes it is what keeps them alive, and she is not wrong. The legend is a shield. As long as they believe he is the one who was foretold, they will protect him, and follow him, and die for him. But Paul is deeply uneasy, and you can feel the trouble of it beneath his stillness. Because he never asked to be a prophet. He does not want to be a god to these people he has come to love. And worse than that, far worse, is what he can see. In his visions, in the dreams that grow sharper and more terrible the deeper into the desert he goes, he sees where the legend leads. He sees the fervor spreading, catching, blazing up out of these dry places, and pouring off the planet in a green tide, armies marching under his name across the stars, billions dead in a holy war fought in his honor, in his name, whether he wills it or not. He sees the future the myth is building, and it terrifies him. The legend keeps him breathing, and the legend, if it grows, will drown the galaxy in blood. And Chani, who sees the man and not the myth, is wary of all of it. She does not want a messiah. She loves Usul, the person, and she watches the story gathering around him with a kind of grief, because she can feel it beginning to carry him away from her, up into something vast and cold and no longer entirely his own. She wants him to stay a man. And Paul, caught between the woman who loves him for himself and the people who need him to be a legend, between the future that frightens him and the present that keeps him alive, does not know how to hold all of it at once. So let him rest here for now, in the deep desert, in the last of the quiet. Loved by Chani in the dark of the Sietch, called Usul by his friends, and Muad'Dib by the tribe. Respected, accepted, at home among the Fremen in a way he never thought he would be again. And yet feeling it all beginning to close in around him, the visions sharpening, the prophecy tightening, the pressure of a destiny he keeps trying to refuse and cannot seem to escape. He can feel that a choice is coming, a door he will have to walk through, a change that will take him even further from the boy he used to be. And on the other side of it waits the deepest test of all, the terrible sacred water, and the transformation that is about to remake him entirely. And so the desert kept you, and you kept the desert, and the two of you moved together now, like breath moving in and out of a sleeping body. The nights belonged to you. The Fremen had a word for the way you had learned to walk without rhythm across the open sand, so that the great worms would not hear you, would not rise, and you walked that way now without thinking, the way you once walked the polished halls of Caladan without thinking. And it was strange to remember that boy, and how far away he was, and how gently the years had carried you from him. The rebellion was growing. You could feel it growing the way you could feel a storm gathering far out past the rim of the world, a pressure in the air, a change in the light. You struck at the spice. That was the heart of it, and you understood the heart of it better than the men who had sent Rabban to hold this planet, better perhaps than the Emperor, on his distant throne. The spice was everything. The spice was the blood of the Imperium, and it flowed only here, only from these sands, and so when you and the Fremen fell upon the harvesters in the pale hour before dawn, when you burned the crawlers and took what you could carry and vanished back into the dunes before the ornithopters could rise, you were not merely raiding. You were closing a hand slowly around the throat of an empire, and you knew it. And the knowing sat quiet and cold inside you, even as your heart raced with the fight. They began to tell stories about you. You could not stop the stories. You would sit at the edge of a fire in some hidden sietch, tired, your body aching in the good clean way of a body that has worked, and you would hear your own name passing from mouth to mouth in the dark, only it was no longer only your name. Muad'Dib, they called you, after the little desert mouse that the Fremen honored for its cunning, for the way it survived where nothing should survive. Usul, your secret name, the strength at the base of the pillar, whispered by those closest to you. And beneath these there was the other name, the older name, the one you did not want, the one that had been planted here in the deep desert long ago, like a seed set down to wait for you. Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world, the one who would lead them to paradise. You heard it, and each time you heard it, something in you turned away, the way a hand turns away from a flame, because you had seen where that name led. You had seen it in the visions that came to you still, sharper now, harder to escape. The visions that spilled the futures out before you like water spilled across sand. You had seen the green banners rising over worlds you had never walked. You had seen soldiers who bore your name marching out across the stars, and you had seen the fires they carried. And the numbers, the terrible numbers, the billions who would die in your name, in the name of a holy war that would take your face and your words and turn them into a reason for slaughter across the whole of the human universe. You had a word for it, a Fremen word that tasted of ash. Jihad. And you dreaded it. You dreaded it more than you dreaded any death of your own. And so you held yourself back from the name. You refused it. You tried with all the strength you had to be only a man, only Paul, only Usul who fought beside his friends. And there was Chani. There was always Chani, and she was the reason more than any other, the truest reason. The reason your heart used when your mind grew too tired to argue. She did not want you to become a myth. She had told you so with her eyes long before she told you with her words. She loved the man, the one who bled when he was cut and laughed when he was glad, and lay beside her in the dark and was simply hers. She did not love the prophet, because she did not believe in the prophet, because she had seen what belief did to her people, how it could make them kneel, how it could take the fierce free heart of a Fremen and bend it low. She wanted you to fight for freedom, not to be worshipped for it, and you wanted the same. You wanted to stand beside her as an equal, as a man among the free people of the desert, and let the old prophecies rot in the sand where the Bene Gesserit had buried them. So you stayed in the north. You stayed near her. You told yourself you could hold this line forever, but there was the south. Always, at the edge of everything, there was the south. Down in the deep desert, in the far reaches where the fundamentalists dwelt, the belief burned hottest. Those were the ones who needed you most, or believed they did. Those were the ones who had held the old faith closest through all the long years of waiting. And to them the signs were not superstition but certainty, and your coming was not a hope, but a fact merely waiting to be spoken aloud. If you went south, if you stood before them and let them look upon you, they would rise. All of them. The full might of the deep Fremen, an ocean of fervor that had never yet been spent, and you knew that if they rose to you, the war would come. The true war, the one that spread beyond this world. So you would not go south. You would not. Your mother had gone south. She had gone deep into the desert and drunk the water of life and lived, and become a reverend mother of the Fremen, and now she carried the old memory of all the mothers who had come before her, and she carried something else besides. She carried your sister. Unborn still, and yet already awake in a way no child should be awake, already touched by the same transforming poison that had opened your mother's mind, already listening, already speaking to your mother from within the dark warmth of the womb. Alia, your sister, who was not yet born and already knew you, already knew all of you, all the dead who lived on in your mother's blood. And your mother had changed. The desert had changed her, or the water had, or the destiny she had chosen to serve. She pressed you now toward the thing you feared. She spoke of prophecy as though it were a road already built and only waiting for your feet. Go south, she told you. Become what they need you to become. And you heard, beneath her voice, the cold, patient machinery of the Bene Gesserit, the sisterhood that had bred toward this moment across 90 generations, and you understood that even your own mother had become, in part, an instrument turned upon you. And still you loved her. That was the hardest thing. You loved her, and you resisted her, and both were true at once. Then the ground began to narrow beneath you, You felt it before you understood it. The futures that had always spread before you like the many branching channels of a river delta began, one by one, to close. Something was coming. Something was tightening around the desert, around you, around everyone you loved, and when you tried to see past it, you found only walls, only darkness, only the terrible narrowing of every path down toward a single point. The Emperor had grown afraid. The Emperor had seen the spice faltering, had seen a Harkonnen fist failing to close, and he had loosed something new upon Arrakis. Fade Routha, the Na-Baron. The other one bred in the shadows of that black-blooded house, cruel and brilliant and hungry, sent now to break the Fremen, to drown the desert in blood until nothing that could resist remained. And you saw, when you looked into the days ahead, that the north would fall. You saw the sietches broken open. You saw the people you loved scattered like seeds cast onto stone. You saw Chani's face among the dead, in some of the futures, in too many of the futures, and you could not bear it. And in all that darkness, in all that narrowing, there was only one path left that led through. Only one. A single thread of light running down through the collapsing futures, one way that saved the ones you loved, one way that led anywhere but into extinction. But you could not see it clearly. It ran ahead of you into a fog your sight could not pierce, and you understood, slowly, with a dread that settled all the way down into your bones, that to see that one path clearly, to walk it, you would have to become more than you were. You would have to open the eye that had never yet been opened. You would have to reach the place inside yourself where all the sight lived, the place your bloodline had been climbing toward for 100 generations. And to reach it, you would have to do the thing that killed men. The water of life, the exhalation of a drowning sandworm, the deadliest poison known to the desert, the sacred liquid that could tear a mind open or stop a heart forever. The Reverend Mothers drank it and lived because they could change it within their own bodies, transmute the poison into something the mind could bear. But no man had ever drunk it and survived. It was death to men. It had always been death to men. That was the law of it, old as the desert itself. And you knew this, and you chose it anyway, because the alternative was to watch everything you loved burn, and because the thin, bright thread of the one saving path ran straight through the heart of that poison, and out the other side. You went to it quietly. There was a kind of peace in you when the choice was finally made, the strange, still peace that comes when there is only one thing left to do. You let them bring the water to you. You looked at it, a small dark bead of it, this thing that had ended so many, and you thought of Chani, and you thought of your mother, and you thought of the billions you were trying even now, even in this, to find some way to spare. And then, you drank. It took you at once. It took you the way the sea takes a stone dropped from a great height, swallowing you down, and your body went rigid and then still, and the world folded shut around you like a hand closing. You fell out of the light. You fell past thought, past pain, past the last flicker of yourself, down into a place that had no floor. Your heart slowed. Your breath grew shallow and then seemed to stop, and to those who watched over your body you looked as one already dead, cold and gray and gone, and they wept for you, and they did not know whether you would ever come back, because no man ever had. And you were not dead, but you were not living either. You lay on the threshold between the two, in the borderland, and it held you there for days. Time meant nothing there. You drifted in the dark, and the dark was full of voices, the voices of the dead, All the ancestors coiled in your blood, beginning to wake and to murmur and to reach for you. And it was too much. It was more than a mind could hold, and you were slipping. You were dissolving into it. You were coming apart, thread by thread, and there was no one to call you back, no anchor, no name to hold on to. And you began to sink past even the border, down toward the true and final dark from which there is no returning. But Chani, she who had not wanted this, she who had begged you never to become the thing the poison would make you, she came to you. When your mother told her that only a woman's tears, the water of a woman's grief, mixed and given, might reach you where you lay, it was Chani who came, though she hated all of it, though every part of her had fought against this road. She let a single tear fall. She gave the water of her own body, her own sorrow, and it was placed upon your lips, and through all the fathomless dark that had swallowed you, you felt it. One small warmth, one drop of the whole living world reaching down to where you had fallen, and you knew whose it was. You knew it the way you would know her hand in a room with no light, and you turned toward it. You followed it up out of the dark, hand over hand, up the thin thread of her grief, up toward the surface of the world. And the woman who had not wanted you to become this was the one whose love became the road that carried you back. There is a mercy in that, and a sorrow, and the two of them are wound together so tightly that even now you cannot pull them apart. You woke, and you were changed. You opened your eyes, and the eyes that opened were not the eyes that had closed. The last door in you had swung wide, and behind it lay everything. Kwisatz Haderach, the one who could be many places at once. The shortening of the way. You could see now in every direction the human mind can turn, and in some it was never meant to turn at all. The past lay open to you, all of it. Every ancestor who had ever lived pouring their memory into you. The long chain of the dead unbroken back into the deeps of time. Men and women both. All of them awake in you now. All of them yours to call upon. And the future lay open too, no longer in fragments, no longer in guesses, but spread before you entire, the vast branching tree of everything that might yet come, and you stood at its root, and saw every branch at once, and it was glory, and it was horror, and there was no wall between the two. For in that total sight, the thing you had feared most stopped being a possibility, and became a certainty. The holy war, the jihad. You saw it now not as one road among many that you might yet avoid, but as the price. The single path that saved Chani, that saved your mother, that saved the free people of the desert, that led you through the closing dark and out into the light on the far side, ran directly through it. There was no way to your survival, no way to theirs, that did not also unleash the storm. The green banners would rise. The legions would go out across the stars in your name. Billions would die. You saw their faces. You saw worlds you had never walked burn in the fire of a faith wearing your face, and you understood at last, with the full and terrible clarity of the thing you had become, that you could not have the ones you loved and also spare the countless ones you would never meet. The choice had never been between war and peace. It had only ever been between which dead you could bear. And so you accepted it. That was the moment the man became something else, not in his body but in his soul, the moment you stopped refusing and took the weight up onto your shoulders and let it settle there for good. You would go south. You would stand before the fervent ones who had waited so long, and you would let them see you, and you would speak the words that would bring them to their feet. You who had fought so hard to remain only a man would become, willingly now, the thing you had dreaded, because the one narrow path demanded it, because there was no longer any other way through, and because you had drunk the poison precisely so that you could see this and not look away. They carried you south, and when you rose before that vast assembly, before the deep Fremen who had kept the old faith burning through all the long years of waiting, you no longer turned from the name. You claimed it. You spoke to them in the voice that could not be refused, the ancient trained power humming beneath your words, and you told them who you were. You told them the truth they had been waiting their whole lives to hear, that the Lisan al-Gaib had come, that the one from the outer world stood before them at last, and the words went out across that sea of upturned faces and set every one of them alight. They rose, all of them, the full might of the South rising as one, an ocean of belief finally given its shape, roaring your name, ready to follow you anywhere, ready to die for you, ready to kill. The thing you had held back for so long broke loose in a single moment and became a flood, and you stood at the head of it, and you did not flinch. And through it all, at the edge of that roaring sea, there was Chani. There was always Chani. She watched you rise. She watched the man she had loved, the man she had pulled back from death with the water of her own grief, lift up before her eyes into the very figure she had feared most in all the world. She saw the worship break over you like a wave. She saw you become a myth while she still stood there loving the man, and something closed in her face, something quiet and final, a grief with no tears left in it. You saw her seeing you. Even now, even risen, even remade, you saw her, and you knew what it was costing, and you knew you were choosing it anyway, and that was perhaps the heaviest thing you carried up onto that height with you. But the desert was yours now. The people were yours. The prophet had come, and the free tribes were one at last, one weapon, one will, one storm gathering at the bottom of the world, with your name on its lips. And you turned that storm, slowly, the way you had learned to turn everything, north and outward, toward the ones who had murdered your father, toward the black house of Harkonnen and the fair-faced killer they had sent, and beyond them, further still, toward the golden throne itself and the emperor who had sent your family to die on these sands. The reckoning was coming. You had seen it. You had become the thing that could bring it. And so you gathered the desert up in your hand, and you began to move, north through the long night, toward the war that would end the old order of the world and set you upon a throne you had never wanted and could no longer refuse. And so the day you had shaped in the deep desert finally comes, quiet at first. The way the largest things often arrive, you feel it before you see it, a pressure in the air, a stillness that spreads across the southern reaches like a held breath. The emperor is coming. Shaddam IV, ruler of the known universe, is leaving his safe places and lowering himself onto the sands of Arrakis. Because you have made the spice stop, because you have made the galaxy afraid, because a name has begun to move through the dark between the stars, and that name is yours, Muad'Dib. You lie awake in the long hour before, listening to the desert breathe, and you understand that everything you have become has been pulling you toward this single point, this narrow, bright doorway, and that once you step through it, you will not be able to step back. They descend in their great ships, and the desert receives them without welcome. The emperor comes with his household around him like a wall of gold and ceremony. His daughter is with him, the Princess Irulan, watchful and clever, a woman who reads the shape of history the way you read the wind. The old Reverend Mother Mohiam is there too, the one whose test once burned your hand, the one who has watched your bloodline the way a gardener watches a slow experiment, and she looks out at the sand now with something that is almost fear. And there are the Harkonnens, brought to heel, brought to account. The Baron, vast and floating and soft with cruelty. And beside him his nephew, Fade Raltha, pale and still, a blade wearing the shape of a man. They have all come to answer for a world that will not obey, and they do not yet understand that they have come to the place where the answer will be given to them. You have planned this. That is the strange, cold thing you must hold on to as you lie there in the dark. This is not chance. You have seen it in the fever of the water of life, you have walked its many corridors, and you have chosen this one, the one that leads through the storm. You know where the Emperor will land. You know that his strength, the terrible Sardaukar, the soldiers bred and broken into weapons, will stand upon the open ground, believing themselves unbeatable. And you know what they do not know. You know that the great storm is coming, the wall of sand that swallows the sky, and that behind it, hidden in its fury, your people are waiting. When the moment comes, it comes like something out of a dream you are only half remembering. You give the sign, and far out across the sand the atomics you have kept, the family stockpile no one thought you would ever dare to use, open the shield wall of the basin. The rock splits, the way opens, and through that broken door the storm pours in, and inside the storm ride the Fremen, and beneath the Fremen ride the worms. You must not think of it as a battle, not the way the histories will write it, all noise and terror. Let it be, instead, a great slow sweep of the world turning over. From a distance, it is almost beautiful, almost silent, the way a tide is silent to a bird far above it. The sandworms rise up out of the murk, like the desert itself standing to its full height, ancient and enormous and utterly without mercy. And the ordered ranks of the Emperor's soldiers, all their discipline, all their gleaming certainty, simply come apart before them, like a line drawn in sand when the water comes. The storm hides the worst of it. That is a kindness the desert gives you and gives the men who die there. You do not have to watch each face. You only watch the whole, the way the dust rolls, the way the machines are thrown, the way the impossible army of the Emperor is unmade in the space of a single darkened afternoon, and you feel almost nothing, and that almost nothing is its own quiet warning to you, though you set it aside. Far off, in the confusion, the great house of Harkonnen falls, and it falls to the smallest hand. Your sister, who is not yet born, who lives still within your mother, moves through this day in her own strange way, the awareness that has grown in her before her first breath. The Baron who killed your grandfather, who killed your father's people, who made your family into a memory. The Baron finds his end low upon the ground, brought down and finished by the child, the promise, the thing the Bene Gesserit never meant to make. He who floated above everyone, who thought himself beyond the reach of any blade, sinks at last into the sand. You do not see it clearly. You only know, the way you know so many things now, that it is done, that the house that hunted your family is broken, and that the last of your father's enemies from that first betrayal has fallen. It should feel like a fire quenched. Mostly, it feels like a page turning. And when the storm thins and the dust begins to settle, the Emperor of the known universe is a prisoner on the floor of the world he thought he ruled. He is brought to you. Shaddam IV, who ordered your father's death, who set the Harkonnens loose upon Arrakis as a trap, who never once imagined that the boy in that trap would grow into the thing standing before him now. You look at him and you feel the whole long weight of your life settle onto this instant. Your father's face is somewhere behind your eyes, and you speak to him not as a suppliant, not as a rebel, but as a man who already holds everything and is only waiting for the words to be said aloud. You claim it all. You claim it by right, the blood of your house, the old law, the lineage the emperor himself carries and shares more closely than he would ever wish to admit. And you claim it by force, by the army at your back, by the worms and the storm and the ruined field, by the simple truth that there is no power left in the universe that can take from you what you are standing upon. You tell the emperor that you will take the throne, and you tell him the price of making it lawful, the price of turning conquest into legitimacy, the thing the old rules require. You will marry his daughter. You will take the Princess Irulan's hand, and through her, you will become not merely the strongest man alive, but the rightful emperor, unassailable, written into the law itself. It is a marriage of politics, and both of you know it in the moment it is spoken. There is no warmth in it, no wish, no tenderness. Irulan meets your demand with a composure that is almost admiration, because she understands power, and she understands that she is being folded into a design far larger than her own desires. She will be a title. She will be a signature on the future. She will not be loved, and she does not, in that moment, ask to be. It is a transaction between houses, a lever to move history, and you reach for it without flinching, and that not flinching is the new thing in you, the cold thing, the thing that has been growing in the dark all this time. Feel, if you can, how far you have traveled to arrive at this coldness. The boy who wept for his father, who was afraid of the future, who did not want the visions, who fought against becoming the Messiah the Fremen wished him to be. That boy is still somewhere inside you, but he has been overwritten, hardened, tempered like metal held in fire until it holds a new shape and cannot be bent back. You feel it, and it frightens you a little. In the quiet places you no longer show anyone. You have become formidable. You have become something people kneel to. And a part of you, small and honest and nearly silent now, watches this happen and wonders where the boy went, and does not answer. But the throne is not simply taken by claiming it. Above you, in the high dark of orbit, the great houses of the Landsraad are watching. Their ships hang there in their thousands, the assembled strength of every noble family in the galaxy, and they will not simply bow because you have said the words. To them you are an upstart, a desert warlord, a religious fever that has toppled one emperor and now dares to wear his crown. They refuse you. Their fleets do not scatter, and they do not kneel. They wait, and their refusal hangs over the whole moment like a second storm gathering, and you understand that the throne you are reaching for is not yet yours, that it will have to be won again, and that the winning may cost more than everything already spent. And there is one more thing standing between you and the crown, one last blade to be answered. Fade Rotha steps forward, the Emperor's own champion now, and the last living son of the house that murdered yours. He demands the right to face you, Canley, the old formal war of blade against blade. You could refuse, but something in you will not, some part that still belongs to the desert, that still owes a debt to the dead, that needs this last enemy answered with your own hand and not with an army. So you agree. And the great sweep of history narrows down, suddenly, from the fall of empires to the smallest thing there is, 2 men and 2 knives in a quiet space, and everyone watching, and no sound at all. Let this duel stay hushed, close, held almost in a whisper. It is not the roar of the battle on the sands. It is something more intimate and more terrible for being so. Feyd-Rautha is fast, and he is trained, and he fights with a cruelty that has been cultivated in him the way a garden is cultivated, and he does not fear death, and that makes him dangerous beyond ordinary men. You move around each other in the narrow space, reading, waiting, and the blades find their moments. He wounds you. You feel it, the sharp, bright line of it, the blood, and for a breath the future itself seems to tremble, because you have seen so many paths in which this is where you fall. This small room, this last enemy, this pale, patient killer. You feel how close the edge is. You feel how easily everything you have become could end here on the point of his knife. But you do not fall. You gather yourself, past the pain, into that stillness you learned in the deep desert, the stillness beneath the fear, and you find the opening the way you have found so many things, half by sight and half by something older than sight. And it is finished, quietly, closely, his life ending against yours in the hush, the last Harkonnen going down at your hand as the first Harkonnens went down before your sisters. There is no triumph in it that you can feel. There is only the sudden quiet after, your own breath, the blood on you, the enemy still. And then, into that quiet, the Emperor of the known universe lowers himself to the ground before you. Shaddam the Fourth kneels. He takes your hand. He presses his lips to the ring, the old ring, the seal of the house he raised you to destroy, and in that kiss the crown passes, and you are, by every law and every force there is, the Emperor. You have won. Understand that. Hold it, because it is true, and it will never be more true than in this instant. Everything you set out to do, everything the visions promised, everything your mother schemed for and the Fremen prayed for, and your enemies feared, all of it has come to pass. You stand at the center of the universe with your foot upon the throne. And in the same instant, in the very heart of your victory, you feel the ground of your own life quietly break beneath you, because there is one person in that room who will not kneel, and she is the only one whose kneeling you ever truly wanted, and she is the only one who will never give it. Chani. Feel her there at the edge of everything. Feel how she has watched this whole day unfold, the boy she loved climbing higher and higher into something she does not recognize and cannot follow. She loved you. Not the Prophet, not Muad'Dib, not the Lisan al-Gaib the southern Fremen wept for. She loved the man, the one who came into the desert with nothing, who learned her people's ways, who lay beside her in the Sayach and spoke to her not as a legend but as himself. She warned you, again and again, about exactly this, about the myth swallowing the man, about power taking the shape of the very thing you swore you would never become. And now she watches you claim an empire and demand another woman's hand in the same cold breath, and she understands, all at once and completely, that the man she loved has been used up to make the emperor she is looking at. You want to reach her. In the private silence beneath the crown, that is the one thing you want, more than the throne, more than the revenge, more than the safety of the human future you told yourself all of this was for. You want to turn to her and be, for one moment, only the man again. But there is no path from where you are standing back to where she is. You made certain of that yourself, choice by choice, vision by vision. And now the distance is real, and it is opening between you like a crack running across the desert floor, widening, silent, impossible to close. And then comes the last turning, the one you saw so long ago and dreaded most of all. The great houses in orbit will not accept you. Their refusal hangs there, absolute, and there is only one answer left to it, only one thing that can bend the assembled might of the galaxy to your will. You must show them what you are. You must loose the thing you have spent all this time trying to hold back. You give the order. You send the Fremen to their ships. You unleash the holy war, the jihad you saw burning across the stars in your first terrible visions, the green banners and the ocean of blood spilling out from Arrakis into every corner of the known worlds. The crusade in your name that will kill in numbers no mind can hold. Feel the full weight of that, quietly, the way you must feel it now. You spent the whole of your becoming trying not to arrive here. You feared this future above all others. You saw the mountains of the dead, and you swore you would find another way, some narrow path through, some version of victory that did not end in this. And there was none. Every path folded back to this one. To win, you had to become the thing you feared. You have gained a universe, and in the same motion you have set loose a slaughter that will roll on long after this day, in your name, under your banner, with your blessing, and there is no undoing it now. The prophet has consumed the boy at last, completely, and the boy watches from somewhere far inside and grieves, and can do nothing. And Chani turns away. Feel it as the last and quietest wound of all, quieter than any blade. She does not scream at you. She does not beg. She simply turns, there in the aftermath, amid the kneeling and the crowning and the beginning of the war, and she walks out toward the open desert that raised her, toward the sand that was always more honest than any throne. You watch her go, you, who can bend the landsrod and command the worms and see the branching paths of all the futures. You cannot take a single step to stop her, because there is nothing you could say that would be true anymore, because the man she would come back for no longer exists, because you spent him to buy all of this. She goes out into the desert alone, and the wind takes her shape and blurs it, and you let her go, because you have to. Because holding the universe means opening your hand and letting fall the one thing in it you loved. So this is where you stand now, at the threshold of everything. The crown is yours. The emperor kneels. The old enemies are dead in the sand. The war is loosed and burning outward through the stars, and you stand at the edge of a throne, bought with a coming ocean of blood, having won all that there is to win, and having lost, in the winning, the one thing that made you a man and not a myth. The desert stretches out beyond the ships, vast and quiet and indifferent, the way it was before you came, and the way it will be after, and you turn, slowly from the doorway she walked through, toward the long strange life that waits on the other side of this victory, toward the throne and the years and the empire and the loneliness of the man who became a god. And the story goes forward with you, into what you have made, into all that comes after. And so the years fold over Arrakis like sand over stone, quiet and endless. And time carries Paul forward into the shape of the man he was always going to become. 12 years pass. 12 years since the boy stood in the great hall and took the throne that had cost him everything. 12 years since the storm broke loose across the stars. And you can feel how long that is, how much a person can lose inside 12 years, how much a person can become without ever once being asked whether he wanted it. Paul Atreides is emperor now. Muad'Dib, they call him, emperor of the known universe, ruler of the Golden Lion throne, master of the spice, master of the desert, master of more worlds than any human being has ever ruled before. And you would think, hearing those titles, that here at last is a man who has everything. But close your eyes and stay with him, and you will feel the truth of it, which is that here is the loneliest man who has ever lived. The jihad came, just as he foresaw it. That is the thing you must hold gently as you drift, that he saw it coming, and still could not stop it. The green banners of the Atreides went out across the galaxy, carried by the Fremen he had loved and trained and unleashed, and they did not go in peace. They went as fire. World after world fell before them, and those that did not kneel were burned, and those that spoke against the name of Muad'Dib were silenced, and the killing spread outward from Arrakis like a stain that no one could wash away. 60 billion. That is the number. 60 billion human beings dead in his name, across the folds of space, over the 12 years of his reign. Whole planets sterilized. Whole peoples gone. Cities that had stood for centuries turned to ash beneath a banner that carried his father's colors and his mother's blood, and his own gentle face made into a god's. Sit with that, softly, the way you might sit beside a sleeping friend. The boy you have followed all this long night, the careful, thoughtful boy of Caladan who loved his father and studied his lessons and dreamed his troubling dreams. That boy is somewhere still inside this emperor. And he carries every one of those deaths. He carries them the way you might carry a stone in your chest, a weight that never sets down, a grief that never finishes, because he did not want this. That is the tenderest, saddest thing of all. He never wanted the jihad. He saw it in his visions long before it came, saw the black flags in the endless dying, and he spent everything he had trying to find a path around it, some narrow thread through the future, where the killing did not happen. And there was none. Every road led here, every choice he made, even the good ones, even the loving ones, carried the holy war along with it, until at last he understood that he had become the thing he most feared, a banner that men would kill and die beneath, a name that would drown worlds. This is the burden Paul carries now, and it is a strange and terrible one, and you should let yourself feel how heavy it is as you sink deeper towards sleep. He can see the future. That gift, that curse, the thing the spice awakened in him back in the deep desert, has grown until it fills his whole life. He sees what is coming. He sees the branching paths of time laid out before him, like a landscape seen from a great height, all the possible tomorrows, all the ways things might go. And you might think that a man who can see the future would be free, would be powerful, would be safe. But it is the opposite. It is a prison. Because to see the future is to be trapped inside it. Every step he takes, he has already seen. Every word he speaks, he knew he would speak. He walks through his own life like a man walking a path he has already walked 1,000 times in dreams, and he cannot step off it, because to step off it is to go blind, and to go blind is to let the future run wild and dark with even greater horrors than the ones he steers toward. So he moves carefully, so carefully, threading his way through time, choosing always the path that leads to the least suffering, and knowing all the while that even the least suffering is a mountain of grief. And the cruelest part, the part that would break a lesser heart, is that his prescience shows him his own sorrows in advance. He sees the losses that are coming. He sees the faces of those he loves and knows how and when he will lose them. He grieves for them while they are still living, still warm, still beside him, because he has already watched them go in the visions that never leave him. Imagine loving someone and mourning them at the same time. Imagine holding a person close and knowing, in your bones, in your open eyes, the exact shape of the day they will be taken from you. That is Paul's every hour. That is what it is to be Muad'Dib. And around him, they build the myth higher and higher. They worship him. The priesthood he never asked for, the Kizeret, the vast machinery of faith that has grown up around his name, they preach him as a living God across 1,000 worlds. His word is scripture. His breath is holy. Men fall to their faces when his shadow passes, and inside all of it, at the very center of that enormous devotion, is one tired man who knows he is not a god, who knows he is only a person who saw too much and could not save anyone, and who cannot say so, because the myth is bigger than he is now, and it would go on killing in his name whether he lived or died. He is trapped inside his own legend, sealed inside it, worshipped, and utterly, utterly alone. But there is warmth still. Let that comfort you as you settle. There is one warm human thing left in Paul's life, and her name is Chani. She is still at his side, still his beloved, the Fremen woman who loved him in the desert before he was an emperor, who loved the man and not the god. And when the day is done, when the petitions are heard and the priests have bowed, and the terrible business of ruling is set aside, it is Chani he turns to. She is the one place he can be Paul again. Just Paul, just Usul, the secret desert name she gave him long ago. With her he does not have to be Muad'Dib. With her the visions loosen their grip a little, and he can breathe, and he can be held by someone who wants nothing from him but him. She is the last piece of the boy from Caledon that still feels real. She is home, in a life that has no home anymore. And yet even here, even in this one good thing, there is a quiet sorrow woven through it, the way there is sorrow woven through everything Paul touches now. Because Chani has borne him no child, and they long for one, both of them, in the private way of two people who love each other and reach toward a future together. But it has not come, and the ache of it sits between them, unspoken and tender. And there are shadows around even this, forces working in secret against them. Though you need not hold the whole of it tonight, let it be enough to feel the softness of it, two people who love each other, wishing for a life to grow between them, and waiting and hoping in a palace at the center of a burning galaxy. There is another woman in Paul's life, and her story is a lonely one too, in a different key. Her name is Irulan, Princess Irulan, daughter of the old emperor whom Paul overthrew, and she is Paul's wife, his wife by law, by treaty, by the cold arithmetic of politics. When Paul took the throne, he took her hand in marriage to make his claim legitimate, to bind the old empire to the new. But it was never love. It was never anything of the heart at all. She is his wife in name only, his empress in title only, and he does not love her, and she knows it, and she has always known it. Chani holds his heart. Irulan holds only the crown, and the crown is cold comfort in an empty bed. And so Irulan spends her days writing. She is a historian, a chronicler, and she sets down the story of Muad'Dib, the official history of his reign, word by careful word. She writes him into legend, And there is a bitter strangeness in that. A woman recording the great love story of her own husband, and another woman. A woman building the myth of a man who will not look at her. She resents it. Quietly, she resents her own emptiness, the hollow place where a marriage should be. The loneliness of standing beside power and being permitted to touch none of its warmth. And that resentment, held quiet and long, will matter more than anyone yet knows. But that is for later. Tonight let her simply be what she is, a lonely woman in a cold room, writing down someone else's love by candlelight. So this is Paul's heart, laid out in the dark, all its pieces. Chani, whom he loves and mourns before her time. Irulan, whom he cannot love and who cannot forgive him for it, the child that will not come. And around all of it, the vast machinery of an empire that runs on his name, and the vast loneliness of a man who cannot tell a single soul the whole truth of what he sees. And now, gently, feel the shadow gathering. Because there are those in the wide galaxy who fear Paul's power, and fear is a patient thing, and it has been working in secret for a long while. There are 3 great forces who have grown afraid of what Muad'Dib has become, and they have begun, quietly, to move against him. There is the Bene Gesserit, the ancient sisterhood, the ones who bred toward a messiah for centuries and then watched their carefully made superhumans slip out of their hands and become something they cannot control. They want his bloodline, they fear his power, and they have not given up their long designs. There is the Spacing Guild, the ones who fold space and carry all the traffic of the stars, who need the spice to see their way, and who tremble at a man whose vision reaches farther than their own. And there is a third, stranger power, the Bene Tleilax, the Tleilaxu, a secretive people, masters of forbidden arts, growers of flesh, makers of things that should not be made. 3 powers, each afraid, each hungry, drawing together into a single quiet conspiracy, a plot with many hands, all of them reaching toward the throne on Arrakis, and their gift comes wrapped in the face of a ghost. This is the softest, saddest thread of all. So let it come to you slowly. You remember Duncan Idaho, the sword master of House Atreides, the loyal and laughing man who taught Paul as a boy, who fought beside his father, who died on the night of the betrayal defending Paul and his mother with his own body, buying their escape into the desert with his life. Duncan, who loved Paul like a son. Duncan, long dead, lost in the ruin of everything Paul once had. The Tleilaxu are masters of a terrible art. From the dead flesh of the fallen, in their hidden tanks, they can grow a living body again. A Gola, they call it. A resurrection that is not quite a resurrection. And so they take what remained of Duncan Idaho, and in their vats they grow him anew, whole and breathing and young, the beloved face returned from the grave. But he does not remember. He does not know that he was ever Duncan. They give him a new name, Hate, and they send him to Arrakis as a gift for the Emperor, a marvel, a wonder, a token of respect. And the gift is also a blade. Hidden inside that returned man, buried in him by his makers, is a purpose meant to wound Paul, to turn against him, a weapon shaped like the person he loved most. And oh, feel what that does to Paul. Feel the ache of it. He looks up one day, and there is Duncan's face. Duncan's eyes, though they are strange now, metal cast, made in a tank. Duncan's stance. Duncan's way of standing. The man who carried him on his shoulders when he was small, alive again and looking back at him without knowing him. To see the beloved dead returned, and to know it is both a gift and a trap. To want, with your whole grieving heart, to believe it is truly him, and to know with your terrible open eyes, that it is a thing your enemies have made to destroy you. Paul, who has lost so much, is handed back one of the things he lost, and it is poisoned, and he knows it is poisoned, and he cannot help but love it anyway. That is the cruelty of the trap closing around him. Even his griefs are turned into weapons. Even his love is used against him. And there is his sister, Aliyah, the strange child you may remember, the one born already knowing, already awake, whose mind opened in the womb when their mother drank the poison and changed. Aliyah is grown now, a young woman, and she is powerful, more powerful in some ways than anyone around her understands. She is beloved by the people, a holy figure herself, the sister of the God. But she is troubled. She carries inside her the same flood of ancestral memory that woke her before she was born. All those voices, all those lives, pressing on a mind that never had a childhood to grow strong in first. And she is lonely too, in her own way, this girl who was never truly a girl. She and Paul are the last of their family, the last true Atreides, and they stand together at the center of everything. Two children of Caladan, grown into figures of terrible power, holding an empire, and each carrying wounds no one else can see. So the trap closes, slowly, softly, the way the desert closes over everything in the end. The empire that was built on Paul, built out of his visions and his choices and his beloved weary self, has become a thing that surrounds him, a cage of worship and grief and plots and love, tightening by degrees around him and around everyone he holds dear. This is where his story is carrying him, toward the questions that his whole life has been asking. What does power cost the one who holds it? Whether a Messiah, however gentle, can ever be anything but a danger to the people who kneel to him. Whether love can stand against destiny, or whether destiny always, in the end, takes what it wants. And the deepest question, the one at the very center of Paul Atreides, the one you may carry down into your dreams. Can a man who can see the future ever escape it? Or is seeing only another way of being caught? And that is his story. That is the whole of it, the boy and the desert and the visions and the throne, the love and the loss and the terrible loneliness of a man who became a god and would have given anything to be only himself again. You know it all now. You have followed him from the green world of his childhood to the sand of his kingdom. From the frightened boy in the flyer to the loneliest man in the universe. There is nothing more you need to hold. Nothing to carry, nothing to solve, nothing to keep. You can set all of it down now, the whole long story, and let it rest. Let the desert hold him. Let the great worms move through the deep sand as they have always moved, slow and patient beneath the dunes, older than all the emperors, indifferent to all the sorrow, carrying the endless spice through the endless dark. Let the wind smooth over the tracks of everything that happened, the way wind always does, until the sand lies quiet and unmarked beneath the stars. Paul is far away now, in his palace at the center of everything, and you are here, warm and safe and still. And the story is over, and there is nothing left to do but breathe, and sink, and drift, out past the throne and the banners and the grief, out past the myth and the man, out into the wide soft dark where the desert stretches on forever, and the worms move slow beneath the sand. And everything, at last, is quiet, and you are carried gently down, and softly down into sleep, and so we come to the end of it, you and I, the whole long life of Paul Atreides laid out behind us now, from the boy on the rainy world to the lonely god on the desert throne. You followed him all the way, the child who dreamed of sand, The son who lost his father in a single night, the fugitive who walked out into the desert with nothing and was taken in by a hard and beautiful people. The young man who rode the great worms and drank the water of life and opened his eyes onto all of time. The emperor who won everything and paid for it with the one thing he wanted most. That was Paul. That was his whole story. And now you can let it go, because here at the end, the strange truth of Paul's life settles over everything like dust settling after a long wind. He could see the future, and it did not save him. He held more power than any human being had ever held, and it did not make him free. He was worshipped by billions, and he was alone. If there is anything to carry away from his story into the soft dark, let it be this gentle, human thing, that all the power and all the prophecy in the universe could not give Paul the one simple gift that you have right now, tonight, freely, without paying anything for it at all. The gift of laying down your burdens, the gift of rest, the gift of letting go. So let go now. You don't have to carry Paul's story any further. You don't have to remember the names, the worlds, the sorrows. Let them grow soft and far away, the desert and the spice and the sleeping worms, until they are just a warm blur at the edge of your mind. A story someone told you once in a low and gentle voice on a night when you finally let yourself rest. Let the desert grow quiet. Let the great worms sink deep into the sand and sleep. Let the empires and their endless wanting fade to nothing, small and distant as stars going out one by one at the far edge of the dark. There is nothing out there in all that vastness that needs anything from you tonight. There is nothing you have to decide, nothing you have to hold, nothing you have to be. There is only your breath, slow and easy, only the warmth of where you're lying, only the soft dark, closing gently over you like sand smoothing itself flat in the wind. You did a kind thing for yourself tonight, choosing to rest. I'm glad you spent this time here with me. If some small part of you is still awake enough to hear this, let my voice be the last thing now, going quieter and quieter, like footsteps walking slowly away across soft sand until it fades into nothing at all. Sleep now. Sleep deeply and sleep well. The desert will keep. The story will keep. Everything can wait for morning. From all of us here at the Spice Sleeper, good night and the sweetest of dreams. Rest well. I'll be right here whenever you need somewhere quiet to land again. Good night.